It all started on Thanksgiving. Not just any Thanksgiving, but the coldest one in a long time. We were all at my grandma's house. Me, my brother Mikey, cousins Jenny and Danny, Aunt Lisa, and of course Grandma. We were waiting for Dad, who was set to arrive later because of his work. I love Grandma's house, but there's a weird old shed in the backyard where Grandma always keeps everything we're not supposed to touch. She's real serious about it. We even nickname it the Forbidden Shed. We were playing catch in the backyard, waiting for the Thanksgiving turkey to roast. Then the ball went into the Forbidden Shed. I knew I was the one who had to get it. Yeah, I was scared, but I didn't want to look like a pansy in front of Mikey and Jenny. I crept up on the weather-beaten old shed and opened the door, squinting to see in the dark. There it was, our ball next to an old wooden box. As I bent down to pick it up, I knocked the box, and out fell a small, old, leather-bound book. It looked like it'd been sitting there for centuries. Jenny, the nosy one, ran over, snatched the book, and said, "Let's look." "It's in some strange language," she said. "Oh wait, there's something in English here." She cleared her throat and read out, "He who reads aloud to awake, in fear shall quake." Mikey laughed. "Quit it. You're just trying to scare us," he said. But honestly, I was scared. The wind started blowing harder, and the trees seemed to whisper secrets. We went back into the house. The smell of pumpkin pie and roasting turkey was everywhere, but there was a sense of uneasiness in my gut. Something was wrong. As evening came, we gathered around the dinner table, but Dad was still not there. That was odd. He was never this late. Grandma tried to hide her worry, but I could see it in her eyes. Just as we said grace, the lights went out. We heard a roar, like a wild lion, that sent shivers down my spine. Suddenly, doors started slamming, and the house shook. Outside, the wind was howling like a pack of wild wolves. Grandma gasped, "The book." She looked so scared, and I'd never seen her scared before. I felt a cold sweat on my forehead. We picked up candles and gathered around Grandma as our only source of life in the utter darkness. "What do we do, Grandma?" Jenny whimpered, clinging to her. Grandma's face was white as paper. She said, "We've to return the book, read the chant again, but backwards." As the eldest, I was chosen to do it. With a heavy heart, I took the candle and the book and made my way to the shed. It was darker than ever, and the bone-chilling wind wasn't making it easy for me either. Back at the shed, my hands shaking, I read the chant backward. Immediately, there was a deafening silence. The wind stopped, and the scary sounds vanished. The lights flicked back on. Just then, we heard a car pull up. It was Dad. Tears streamed down Grandma's face as she hugged us. We promised to never go into the shed again. It wasn't a normal Thanksgiving, but we were thankful. Thankful that we were together, and most of all, that the terror was over. From then on, no one dared to speak of the Forbidden Shed and its secret again. Thanksgiving night. My family, as custom dictates, congregated at the grand old house deep in the old part of town. The house, belonging to my cookie and reclusive great-uncle Arthur, was an embodiment of family history, towering proudly with its elaborate carved pumpkins and goblins on the verge of being Christmas elves soon. Unbeknownst to us, an unforgettable, scary story was about to be woven. A story that would drastically alter every family Thanksgiving henceforth. As the scent of roasted turkey and sweet pumpkin pie wafted through the house, the jovial atmosphere was tainted by an inexplicable feeling of unease. Uncle Arthur's frail figure appeared more stooped, his eyes shrouded with fear. The ancient chandelier flickered ominously in the dining room, casting strange shadows on the family portraits. "Welcome, welcome," Arthur murmured, eyes darting towards the darkest corners of the house nervously. I frowned and met eyes with my sister, Emily, who shrugged. Our uncanny family, their eccentricities, and strange traditions were still new to us. We had moved overseas when we were children. Dinner commenced, and amidst the laughter and stories, Uncle Arthur stood, frail hands shaking. "May I have the attention of the family?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The room went instantly quiet. Everyone's attention now turned to the patriarch. A shiver of apprehension trickled down my spine as he began an old family tale, one about the Wailer of Thanksgiving, a vengeful spirit who would rise yearly to seek revenge on our ancestor who had betrayed him. Each word of the tale echoed in the silent room, and as the story took a dark turn, the lights in the room dimmed. Arthur finished the tale with a somber silence, an unspoken dread hanging in the air. The family sat stiff, momentarily paralyzed. Suddenly, the wind outside roared to life, creating ghostly whispers through the trees. A dreadful wail tore through the silence, high and mournful. Lights flickered. Shadows played on the old family portraits. The atmosphere turned cold. "Hey, Arthur, this is some kind of joke, right?" Aunt Marcy stammered, her eyes wide, hands clenched. "No, Marcy," Uncle Arthur replied, a palpable terror in his voice. "The Wailer has come." The old house moaned, the walls popping and cracking around us. My heart pounded as echoes of the Wailer's tormented cries danced through my mind. It's just not possible." I tried to reassure myself, my voice wavering in fear. It felt like ages before the wailing diminished into the cold night, and the fear-ridden atmosphere seemed to withdraw, making way for confusion. We spent the night huddled together, too scared to move, hardly daring to breathe. Morning arrived. The sun's early rays fell upon the faces of exhausted family members. There were no signs of paranormal events from the night before. Even the cold was replaced by a warm, pleasant ambience. Uncle Arthur, however, was nowhere to be found. His bedroom was left undisturbed, and his walking cane lay forgotten next to the now calm fireplace. No footprints, no notes. It was as though he'd vaporized into the thin morning air. While the police were contacted, our family was left to our devices, musing over the events of the last night. The vanishing of Uncle Arthur, the wailing haunting our nightmares. We were submerged in uncertainty. Had the Wailer truly visited? Had Arthur become its victim? Despite the warmth of the day, a perpetual frost seemed to settle in my heart. Thanksgiving in our family had acquired a scary past it would never shake off. From that day on, we remembered not just our blessings and joy during Thanksgiving. We also remembered the haunting wail, Arthur's frightened eyes, his mysterious disappearance, and the terrifying Thanksgiving night etched into our family's history. Whether truth or legend, our Thanksgiving was forever storm-touched, a chilling chapter in our family tale. And even as we sat together, digested the turkey and pie, laughter echoing in the dining room, we could not forget the frosty touch of the unseen, the whispers of our past, and the enigmatic end of Uncle Arthur. So now, as I welcome my family to Thanksgiving dinner in the same old house, I can't help but look at the darkest corners of the house, listening to the wind, remembering Uncle Arthur, and wondering if the Wailer of Thanksgiving would ever descend on us again. Thanksgiving, a time for family and food and gratitude. But my Thanksgiving tale, it was different. It was a chilling night to remember, one bearing the weight of both horror and enlightenment. I was back in my childhood home, the old farmhouse that stood tall amidst the barren November fields. I'd loved the place as a kid, but coming back as an adult brought a not-so-familiar feeling I didn't quite understand. The creaking wooden floor, the dated wallpaper, it all had an eerie charm now. Before arriving, my sole intention was to cook turkey, to enjoy the stuffing and cranberry sauce, maybe some pumpkin pie, a Norman Rockwell painting come to life. But that was before I discovered the locked basement door. "Why's the basement off limits, Aunt Edna?" I asked during dinner. She paused, a ghastly pallor washing over her face. "It's just old things, dear. You won't find anything useful there," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. Aunt Edna was typically robust, her discomposure unsettling. Later that night, curiosity piqued. I found myself standing before the basement door. I could feel an unnatural chill seeping from beneath, a stunning contrast to the cozy warmth of the home. It seemed as though the basement was calling out to me, whispering tales of forgotten times. With a skeleton key I'd found above the fireplace, I turned the lock. Down the staircase, I walked into palpable darkness, the air dense and cold. The floor was clad in age-old dust and cobwebs hung like melancholy drapes. Among the usual miscellanea, I saw it, an antique mirror. But this mirror, it was different. I could see my reflection, but instead of my cozy sweater and jeans, the me in the mirror wore an old-timey pilgrim's outfit. Jumping back in terror, I stared at the crawling dread in my reflection. "Who are you?" it asked, its voice a hollow echo of mine. I'm Jonathan." "Who are you?" I stammered back, scarcely believing the words escaping my lips. "I am also Jonathan, but from a different time. A time of famine. A brutal winter. 1621. In this nightmarish, reality-bending moment, I was conversing with a Pilgrim-era replica myself. The plausible insanity of the situation gnawed at my sanity. "What do you want from me?" I asked, breath caught in my throat. "I wish to show you something." Suddenly, I was no longer in the basement, but a harsh field surrounded by withering crops and bitter cold. Pilgrim Jonathan stood beside me, pointing towards the hollow eyes of starving people. "Behold, the true face of the first Thanksgiving. We had nothing, yet we were grateful. Can you say the same for your times?" I looked around at the suffering. I felt the biting cold. Emotion welled within me. Fear, sorrow, empathy, all mixed with a dread realization. Awaking with a start, I found myself sprawled on the basement floor. As my eyes darted to the now benign mirror, countless questions cascaded through my unsettled mind. Was it just a dream? A vision? Or a grim, otherworldly voyage? Ascending from the basement, I rejoined my family. The laughter, the delicious food, all lay before me in a new light now. A blunt reminder of the stark dichotomy of Thanksgiving's history contrasted against its present emancipation. That bone-chilling encounter remains with me ever since, shaping not just my Thanksgivings, but every day of my existence. A reminder that we live in abundance, and how fundamental it is to acknowledge it with gratitude. For there was a time when such luxury was the farthest from reality. As I carry forward with my life, the mirror in the basement remains locked away. But its message, the chilling truth of the first Thanksgiving, echoes on. A scary, but enlightening Thanksgiving story of my own. Thanksgiving is traditionally a time of joy and togetherness. For me, it used to be like this too. Used to, but that changed on a freezing Thanksgiving night back in 2023. My house stood alone on a secluded lane, blanketed by dense evergreens. That year, the evening carried an eerie silence. Snow, deliberately falling, muffled even the wind. As I checked the golden brown turkey in the oven, I felt a wicked sense of apprehension, but dismissed it as holiday jitters. "Everything okay in there?" voiced my wife, Sarah, from the dining room. We were expecting our usual crowd, our 2 kids, their spouses, and our 4 charming grandchildren. "Just fine, love," I replied, planting a forced smile on my face. The hammering of my heart was inexplicably strong. Anxiety twisted my insides, but I convinced myself it was nothing more than the stress of hosting. Our guests arrived, cutting through the gloomy weather with their boisterous cheer, and for a brief moment, the fear ebbed away. Before long, we were all exchanging stories and carving into the delectable spread of traditional Thanksgiving delights. Midway through the evening, the power blinked out. The light drizzle outside had taken a vicious turn into a full-blown blizzard. Gales wailed and groaned, lashing at our confines as darkness crept in around us. The grandchildren whimpered in the sudden gloom. "I'll get the generator started," I said, making my way toward the garage. But when I wrenched open the door, I froze. Boot-printed snow trailed into the shadows of the garage. But we were all inside before the blizzard. Who could have trespassed? I felt a chill down my spine, not from the biting winds, but rising fear. Brushing it off as a possible misinterpretation, I followed the tracks. As I reached the generator, I found it open, wires ripped out and scattered haphazardly. Sabotage. The sense of dread I felt earlier surged back, threatening to consume me. I rushed back to the house, locking the doors behind me. The sight that awaited me in the living room curdled my blood. All the laughter had drained away. Sarah stood frozen, her face white as the storm outside, staring at the TV which flickered back to life, powered by its internal backup battery. On the screen was a live feed of us, our every move being broadcast from various corners of our home. Our sanctuary had been violated. Someone had been watching, waiting. "We need to leave," I hissed, but it was already too late. The pounding commenced, echoing through the house, a bone-chilling staccato that silenced even the blizzard. The windows fogged up, inscriptions scribbled in the condensation. "Happy Thanksgiving, don't let me in." The room was intense with terror. The children whimpered, huddled close to their parents, their innocence replaced with dread. We were not alone. "I'm calling the police," said my son-in-law John, but his phone met only static. The landline just echoed a dreadful, hollow tone. We were cut off from the world. The pounding stopped abruptly. The resulting silence was deafening. Then the whispering started. It was everywhere, ruthlessly invading our minds. It begged, in rasping breaths, "Let me in, it's cold outside." We spent the night huddled together in the living room, whispering haunting us. At dawn, as the storm retreated, the whispering ceased. Our night of horror ended with the arrival of the police. They found no perpetrator, no cameras, just a terrified family. No one outside believed our story. "Thanksgiving stress," they said, "playing tricks with your mind." But we know what we heard, what we saw. That Thanksgiving changed everything. The joy and togetherness replaced by terror and suspicion. That eerie Thanksgiving night we realized we were never really alone. And ever since, every knock sends a shiver down our spines. Thanksgiving had always been my favorite holiday. The savory sense of roasting turkey, sweet pies, and my family's loving chatter. But that particular year, our gathering at the old family farmhouse in rural Vermont witnessed events which surpassed any supernatural tale one might pass in hushed tones around a campfire. As tradition would dictate, a vivacious feast was held at our ancestral home. When I first stepped through the creaky wooden doors, my uncle's loud laughter, my aunt's mirthful stories, and the familiar feeling of belonging welcomed me. A warm glow bathed the whole room, and my grandmother's antique chandelier cast splintered rainbows on the worn mahogany floor. After a hearty dinner and delightful conversation, a peculiar gust of wind grumbled outside, rattling the windows. Our laughter stilled as we stole glances at the inky night beyond. The weather shifted fast in those parts, but this felt different, almost unnatural. My cousin, Tim, loved all things supernatural, and breaking awkward moments chimed in. "Did you guys ever hear the story of the Wailing Widow who haunts this homestead on Thanksgiving night?" We exchanged doubtful glances. "Tim, quit being dramatic," my sister said, though the uneasiness in her voice suggested she didn't quite believe in her casual dismissal. Ignoring her, Tim dove right into the tale, describing how, 100 years ago, a lonely widow was so grief-stricken over her husband's death that she wandered into a snowstorm on Thanksgiving and perished. Her spirit supposedly roams, seeking company on this cold holiday, crying out in loneliness. As the story ended, a chilling wail echoed outside. Everyone fell silent. Through the frosted window panes, a svelte silhouette materialized against the swirling snow. Goosebumps prickled along my nape, a primal fear gripping me. "What was that?" whispered my younger brother. His eyes were wide, and he clutched his stuffed bear. We huddled closer together, watching as the figure ambled uncomfortably closer. Bright lightning illuminated her form, a woman in antique clothing, her face obscured by a frost-tinted veil. She seemed to weep, and with each sorrow-filled groan, the house creaked in sadness. "Maybe we should invite her in," my grandmother suggested infamously, her tired eyes filled with empathy, reflecting the old-world superstitions she grew up with. But the air became electric with our protests. In all this, I found myself compelled towards the door. My heart pounded, but I also felt a peculiar sympathy for our spectral visitor. Ignoring the pleas of my relatives, I reached towards the door, and instantly, a gust of frigid wind slammed it open. The wailing wind carried her inside. She stood in the threshold, her intense frozen stare focusing on me. I could hear an unspoken plea in her wailing, a deep yearning for something lost. This spectral manifestation sought only solace. Overwhelmed by compassion, yet petrified, I extended my hand towards her. But just as quickly, she vanished, leaving behind an unnatural cold and silence that echoed within the filigree wallpaper. After that night, Thanksgiving was never the same. There was a solemn quality to it, a respect for the stories of old and the spirits who may roam in the wind and snow. The fear in our hearts was replaced by understanding and compassion. The Wailing Widow had lost her home, but every Thanksgiving, as our family gathers, we ensure she's remembered, recognized. We tell her tale. We quieten to listen to her cries in the wind. By acknowledging her, we've learned a new empathy for the lonely and the lost. The ghost in our story is no longer an unimaginable fear, but a part of our family's complex tapestry.